Well, the Tennessee Vols are back inside Neyland Stadium Saturday night. They're getting ready for a blackout. We're already in blackout, getting ready for those Wildcats. Should be an interesting game, Jimmy, especially when you kind of look at what Kentucky version we might get, because they are consistently inconsistent. Will we get that Georgia Ole Miss version, or will we get what they've done the last two games? And I think that's what has everybody maybe a cautiously optimistic heading into this game, because you don't know, like, will this be a Kentucky team that gets the passing game going, or will this be a Tennessee team that gets the passing game going? I think the biggest difference will be whether or not Tennessee can get the connection between Nico and the wide receivers.
Yeah, Kentucky's kind of like what we've seen in college football this year. You don't know week to week what you're going to get.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, one of the things that Tennessee needed to work on in the off week was the passing game.
Mm-hmm.
They've got to improve that, and I thought there were signs of that in the second half against Alabama. But I think Nico, the receivers, they got to get on the same page. He can't overthrow his receivers.
Yeah.
He's got to find the open receiver. But what he did in the second half, he made a terrific pass on a rollout to the right to Dante Thornton.
Yeah.
Then he made a really nice pass to Chris Brazzell in the end zone for a touchdown. So he started showing signs. And Paige, I thought he started playing better after he got the heck knocked out of him.
Right.
I think that
almost recalibrated him in a way.
Like it was a wake-up call for
Yeah.
him. But he played better after that for whatever reason.
Yeah.
If he can play the rest of the season like he did the second half against Alabama, I would be very optimistic that Tennessee's passing game will click it in gear. And remember, when people early in the year were talking about Nico being a Heisman Trophy candidate,
Mm-hmm.
we tried to put the brakes on that. He's still a work in progress. He
Yeah.
is not a finished product. And I think you'll see him get better in the month of November.
Yeah, and I think, mentioning Dante Thornton and Chris Brazzell, two players that kind of turned the tide for Tennessee in that game against Alabama, they talked a lot about, their wide receivers coach and Kelsey Pope talked a lot about how that really will build confidence heading into this game. Even for someone like Dante Thornton, who really has gone through, like, a number of rough spots. Yeah, he was supposed to be that freak athlete a year ago. Didn't really see a lot of that in 2023, but we're seeing some of that here in 2024. Like, he had that 55-yard reception from Nico in that game, and I think when you continue to talk about, like, all the confidence that they're building, I think this might be the game, or at least could be the game, where you actually see that confidence turn into, like, actual receptions and explosive plays.
Yeah, and he does have a lot of ability. He's a big body. He's very fast. He gets open quite a bit. One of the things, though, he's missed a lot of snaps because of injury.
Yeah.
Squirrel White has got a shoulder issue, and I think that's impacted his productivity. If they get the receivers healthy and Nico becomes a little bit more accurate and finds open receivers, there's no reason this passing game shouldn't flourish. I mean, they've gone 5 games in a row where they've thrown for less than 200 yards.
Yeah.
Most of the yards they got against Alabama were in the second half, so
Right.
that's why it's encouraging to see what happens going forward.
Do you think, and kind of just like noticing where the balls are spotted when he is going downfield, sometimes not only are they sometimes overthrown, but sometimes they're a little high as well. And
Yeah.
kind of what I was seeing was sometimes that's an indicator of a quarterback not being settled in the game, maybe being a little too amped up, a little
Right.
too anxious.
Right.
Do you think now that we're in the back half of the season, like, he will be more settled in earlier in the game and you won't have to wait until, like, oh, can't wait for halftime, can't wait for the second half team to come out? Do you think now is kind of when we'll see him be more calm? Do you think that's maybe why the balls aren't necessarily on target?
I think it's one reason why, and I think Josh Heupel would love to see his quarterback settle in earlier.
Yeah.
He referenced that during the Alabama game, or after the Alabama game, about that situation. One of the things Nico also needs to do, in my opinion, is he needs to put a little bit more air on the football when he's throwing a deep ball. Watch one of the best deep ball throws in the NFL is Russell Wilson,
Yeah.
and he has a high arcing pass. Jalen Milroe throws a high arcing pass on his deep balls. He's very accurate. And even if you throw one of those, and even if it's slightly underthrown, your receiver can adjust to that.
Yeah.
Give him a chance to make a play. If you throw a line drive and you overthrow it, there's no chance. So he's got to be a little bit better with his touch on those throws. I think he throws a really good slant pass. I think he's a good passer on the run. The exhibit was a pass to Thornton.
Yeah.
So he's got the tools to do it. He's not been as accurate as I thought. He's had a few drops along the way. And then the offensive line hasn't protected him as well as it could have or should have.
Yeah.
So all of those things have contributed to this passing game not being at an optimum level. If they can get those things corrected, which they are correctable in my opinion, then this passing game should should be a lot better the last half of the season.
Yeah, the velocity in which Nico throws with, I don't know if it gets enough credit. Got tons of credit with Joe Milton, but I think he almost has just much fire behind his throws as well. You mentioned the line drives, and that really is what it is. You look downfield earlier in the game, and I think it was maybe a post route to Squirrel White that was overthrown, and then it was a go route. I think it might have been to Chris Brazel, and that was overthrown as well. And that really didn't have any arc on either of those passes, which is interesting.
No, it didn't. And there was another play where he threw it to Brazel, and he had Nimrod running wide open.
Yeah,
Nimrod's
and he didn't know what side it was going to go on.
Yeah. So he needs to make sure he throws to the right guy. I was talking to somebody that knows a lot more about quarterback play than I do before the year, and he said the only thing I worry about with Nico is his field vision. Hendon Hooker saw the field extremely well.
Yeah.
So under pressure, under duress, when he's got defensive ends coming at him, how's he going to see the field? Is he going to look downfield, or is he going to start looking at the defensive lineman? Yeah. I think after he got hit a few times, he started looking at defensive linemen when he was pressured. Early in the year, against lesser opponents, he kept his eyes downfield. But I think against Alabama in the second half, he did a much better job of focusing in on the receivers. And we'll see if that carries over. I think it will. I think he gained confidence. I think the offense gained confidence from that. And in my opinion, I don't think they were playing with a lot of confidence earlier. And I also think that was reflected in Josh Heupel's play calling.
Yeah.
He got really conservative in some of those
screens,
games. Yeah. 3rd and 7, you run up the middle. Really?
Right.
So
3 times in a row, yeah.
You don't do that with Hendon Hooker.
No.
And so I think Heupel's trying to gain confidence in Nico. Nico's got to give him reason to be confident. And then Nico's got to gain the confidence. And I think that they have found that. Again, I think the second half against Alabama was huge.
Yeah, and I think you mentioning Nico's vision also has a lot to do, obviously, with him getting through his progressions. But I think it starts at the offensive line where they'll be tested again. I mean, you have, I think his name's Deion Walker for Kentucky, one of their defensive tackles. I think that could put a lot of pressure on Tennessee's own offensive tackles, which have gotten a little bit of attention this season, and not always for good reason.
Walker's a really good player. J.J. Weaver's a really good player. Those are 2 outstanding defensive players for Kentucky on the front. Yeah. And Tennessee's going to have to deal with them. And Tennessee's offensive tackles need to play better. And I'll say this, if they're not playing as well as I would want them to play, if I'm an offensive coach or an offensive line coach, I'm going to put a tight end over there to help them. Or I'm going to have a running back chip somebody to try to help them a little bit in their pass protection. Or, which Tennessee did against Alabama, roll him out. Roll out Nico and take some of that pressure away. And now he's only got to read half the field. And he's only going to have half the receivers available. But still, if one of them gets open, he should be able to hit him. So, and he's unlike Milton, Nico's a very good passer on the run. Yeah. So I think they need to utilize that.
Yeah. I think what could be interesting, too, I think Kentucky has the 19th best pass defense. They're giving up about 9 yards per attempt, but 13 per completion. So I think that's enough of a window, too, for us to maybe see those early passes, because you talk about building confidence in the play call. We saw tons of passes in the first half against Alabama, which, the week prior, we hardly saw any deep passes in the first half of that game. I think this could be a chance to try and, test the waters early in the game.
I think so. And here's another one for you. Against Florida, which scored 48 points against Kentucky, DJ Langway averaged 37 yards on 7 completions.
Wow.
37 yards on 7 completions. And then Florida had a freshman running back that ran for 5 touchdowns. So you don't really know which Kentucky defense is going to show up.
And that's the most confusing thing about this matchup.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah. And so, but you never know from one game to the next which team's going to show up.
Yeah.
After an open date last time, Tennessee's team didn't really show up against Arkansas, right?
Yeah.
I think they learned their lesson. I would be very surprised. And by the way, Heupel's got a really good record coming off an open date in his career as a head coach.
And they've done really well against Kentucky with Heupel.
Yeah, they have. And they've done really well against Kentucky with most any coach they've had.
Yeah, fair.
I mean, they've won 36 of the last 39. So, but Kentucky still – look, if Kentucky can go on the road and beat Ole Miss, which is ranked 5th in the country – then they're a dangerous opponent. You cannot take them lightly. If they lose by 1 point to Georgia, 13-12, you cannot take them lightly. Having said that, the way Kentucky's played the last 2 games makes you think that Tennessee should be able to rack up a lot of points. Kentucky has not scored more than 20 points in an SEC game this year.
Right.
Tennessee hadn't allowed 20 points in a game this year.
No more than 19. I think they came against Arkansas.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that would favor Tennessee. And there's a reason Tennessee's favored by more than 2 touchdowns. I get that. And if Tennessee shows up and plays its game, I think they'll cover. But again, you've got to show up and play. If you play like you did against Arkansas, you're going to be in a battle against Kentucky.
Yeah, absolutely. I think even when you flip it, if we look on the defensive side of everything, I think this could be a game, again, where maybe Jermod McCoy has another fantastic game or where Will Brooks has a moment to shine, because if they can get their 2 wide receivers active in this game, Barryon Brown and Dane Key, who appear to be the favorite targets here, this could be a really interesting game because they really do have the ability to stretch the field vertically if the quarterback is able to get them active.
Well, those 2 receivers are by far the strength of Kentucky's offense. There's no question about that. The running backs are okay. Their top 2 running backs have gained 668 yards combined this year. Brock Vandegrift, a 5-star high school kid, transferring from Georgia, was supposed to be the answer at quarterback. He's not played very well.
Yeah.
He's averaging 155 yards passing per game, which is last in the league. He's thrown for 120 yards in 3 games this year or less. Against South Carolina, he was, how about this, 3 of 10 for 30 yards.
What?
Against South Carolina.
Yeah.
And they got blown out. He's had 2 games of over 200 yards against lesser opponents. So he has not played to the level that they need him to play. So they do try to rely on a running game, which is okay. Their offensive line is okay.
Yeah.
They need to take advantage of their receivers, but they got to have a quarterback that can hit them. So Vandegrift has not played very well this year overall.
Yeah.
He ranks among the worst in the SEC in pass efficiency. Does he have the talent? Well, if he was a 5-star, you would think he might. So maybe he has a breakout game. But, boy, I wouldn't expect that against the number 1 defense in the SEC.
Absolutely not, especially when you look at Tennessee's run defense. So I think I saw a stat where the quarterback, he's taken a sack like 9% of the time. So I think the Tennessee's defense might have a field day with that if their offensive line isn't holding up. And it was nice. We actually had a chance to hear from Rodney Gardner earlier this week, which we hardly ever hear from him. And then not only do we rarely hear from him, but we rarely hear, compliments from Rodney Gardner. And he was very complimentary of his defensive line earlier this week, even when I asked him about, Dominic Bailey, because I think he's one of the linemen that's kind of under the radar in the way that he's able to affect the quarterback. And he's like, one of the things I really admire about him. I'm like, admire? I was like, I've not heard that word in a while. He's like, Bailey came here with no expectations. We didn't expect much from him. He wasn't given anything. We had tons of question marks. But he's someone that's really come along, especially this season. So far, this is his best season. Even coming off of the game against Alabama, I think it was to end the first half. There were 3 quarterback pressures in a row to kind of end Alabama's drive. One, of course, coming from James Pierce Jr., then I think it was Omar Norman-Lott, who you talked to on the Rewind on Thursday, and then Dominic Bailey. So I think those 3 guys specifically are going to keep Vandegrift very uncomfortable all game long.
Yeah, Bailey's an example of a Tennessee defensive lineman who has improved since he got here, which is a credit to Rodney Garner. Vandegrift's been sacked 17 times. And he has some athletic ability. He can scramble. But here's another point, too. So Alabama's got an outstanding running quarterback. They got a couple of good running backs. They ran for 75 yards against Tennessee.
Right.
They're better at running the football than Kentucky.
Exactly.
So do I think Kentucky's going to get 75 yards or more? No, against Tennessee, which is going to put pressure on Vandegrift, which means Tennessee can put pressure on him in passing situations. So I like Tennessee's matchup defensively against Kentucky's offense.
Knowing that, how much do you think maybe their game plan for Tennessee is to either load the box or just zero blitz on all of the plays for Tennessee's defense?
I think you'll see a pretty fair share of blitzing. Tim Banks, the defensive coordinator, likes to blitz.
Yeah.
And you have cornerbacks who can handle that. In particular, Jermod McCoy, who is a terrific defensive back. He's a lot better than I anticipated he would be. In my opinion, he's a first-team All-SEC player. Yeah. He has done an outstanding job.
He's a semifinalist for the Thorpe Award.
And he should be.
Yeah.
Ricky Gibson on the other side is a pretty good player.
Yeah.
So you got cornerbacks you can trust, which allows you to blitz even more and put pressure on Vandegrift. And Vandegrift has the ability to scramble a bit. I don't know if you want to use a spy on him, maybe. But I think he's going to be under duress a lot during this game, in particular if Tennessee can get out to an early lead. Now, I think I'm right about this. Tennessee hadn't scored in the first half in 3 games in a row,
Correct.
which you got to go back to the 1960s
Oh, wow.
to find the last time that's happened.
Jeez, I didn't know that.
And even when they had Jeremy Pruitt over there, they scored some in the
Oh,
first
no,
half.
Jimmy.
So this is, this is gnawing at Josh Heupel.
For
Tennessee in 2022 led the nation in first quarter points scored.
Yeah.
And they started out this year doing that.
Yeah. They get some
But now-
non-con, but yes,
Yeah.
like you, there's your ceiling, you know?
Yeah, and now in the last 2 games, they have had very good opening drives, but fumble.
Right.
Nico fumble once, Samson fumble.
I think, what was that, like his first fumble too?
For Samson, that's
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
So if they can just avoid those kind of mistakes, there are typically 3 things that stop them on a drive. They get a sack, they get a penalty, or they have a turnover.
Yep.
If they can just avoid that, if they can stop shooting themselves in the foot, then they're going to score some points in the first half.
Yeah.
Or even in the first quarter. But
Man, get back to that Oklahoma game. Come on.
Yeah. So those are some of the keys. But in charting their games on their drives, if they can just keep it clean, they're going to score well over 50% of their possessions unless they have a sack, a penalty, or a turnover.
Yeah, and I think a telling thing too about Tennessee's defense, talking about Vandergrift being under distress this whole game. When I asked Caleb Perry earlier this week, the linebacker, I was like, you guys have not given up more than 19 points this year. Like, how is that feeding into your mindset, the mentality of this team? He's like, oh, it's great. Definitely, like, feeds our confidence. But when we go back and watch the film room, like, we're mad we were even in a position to let up points. I'm like, but it's 19 points. Like, that's nothing. So the fact that even that kind of frustrates them or, like, angers them, I think only tells you, like, how much this team was going to get up for this game against Kentucky. Not that they needed any, like, extra convincing to get up for a Kentucky Wildcat game, but I think we could maybe see even fewer than 19 points being let up in this game.
I think so too. And
Yeah.
here's the thing I like about the defense. So the offense at various times has put the defense in harm's way. Maybe there was a fumble
Right.
at midfield or on their own 30-yard line or whatever, a turnover here or there. When the defense goes out there, it's like a challenge. Okay,
Yeah.
the other team's got the ball on our 20, but they ain't going to score.
Mm-hmm.
And even looking back to when they forced that fumble against Graham Mertz against Florida on the 1-yard line by
Yep.
James Pierce, that's a challenge to them to stop you. And this is the best defense I've seen at Tennessee. I'd go back to 1998.
I mean, I believe it because you hear Josh Heupel all the time talk about like their competitive composure, their mental makeup, and it really is like regardless of the score, regardless that they were just out there maybe a snap ago and it gets turned over, like they go out there ready to dominate. There's no letdown, no let off, and none of that. And I think that's so impressive to see the team respond the way they do, regardless of the situation or what the scoreboard is telling you.
A lot of times you'll see a team blowing out another team. It's 45-0. The other team will score 2 touchdowns in the fourth quarter.
Yeah,
All right.
nice garbage time scores. Yeah,
That doesn't happen with Tennessee because when they put in their second or third team defensive line, they're about as good as the starters.
yeah,
And their linebackers have pretty good depth. They don't play as many defensive backs, but they're still coming after you in the fourth quarter, even if they have a big lead, which is one reason other teams are not racking up garbage points against Tennessee's defense. There's a lot of pride there. But for them to rank number 1 in the SEC in run defense, total defense, points allowed, this deep into the season,
Yep.
that's pretty darn impressive. Somebody asked me the other day, has Tennessee got the best defense in the SEC? And I said, I still have to consider Georgia.
yeah.
We'll see going down the stretch, but Georgia gave up a lot of points to Alabama. A lot more points to Alabama than did Tennessee. They only gave up 12 to Kentucky, so we'll see where that comparison is. But those, to me, are the 2 best defenses in the league.
Yeah, that's exactly why I don't bet at all because I'm like, I have no idea what's going to go on in that game. I do think Tennessee has like the 3rd total defense in the country as well.
Yes.
So I guess lastly, before we wrap it up, your final score prediction. What do you have the score being?
I've got Tennessee finally hitting the 30-point mark. I've got Tennessee
Ooh.
30-13.
Okay.
I don't see Kentucky getting to 20.
No.
They may not even get to 13, but I've got 30-13 Tennessee.
Yeah, I took them 28-10. I wasn't sure if they would eclipse the 30-point mark yet, but I do think that they'll be efficient in the red zone. So I think if they're able to get down there, they'll get that. And I do have 10 points because I'm like, maybe you'll get a couple field goals, maybe a touchdown. Who knows how that'll work out. But definitely I don't think they're going to get that 20 clip mark at all.
No, I don't either. I'd be very surprised if they do. And Kentucky's offense is, well, they're last in the league in points per game.
Yeah.
And they're last in passing yards per game, and they're 15th in total offense.
Yeah.
So their offense is not very good. So
This is a chance to
yeah.
exploit some things.
It is.
Yeah.
It is.
Absolutely. All right, Jimmy, I appreciate it. So that's our episode on Tennessee and Kentucky football coming up on Saturday. We also have an interview on the Rewind with Omar Norman Lott and Will Brooks. And then I have a recap from the Lady Vols' exhibition game against Carson Newman. You want to talk about explosive offenses, Jimmy? Look at what Kim Caldwell did against Carson Newman. Absolutely exciting. But we will be back Sunday for a post-game recap of Tennessee and Kentucky. We'll talk to you guys then.